morning, everybody. My name's Howarth. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about Raspberry Pi. I just want to thank Michelle, actually. That was an amazing presentation. What an inspiring story. So thank you for that. And there's a lot of resonance in what Michelle has talked about in terms of sort of, enabling people to experiment and explore and fail with Raspberry Pi. So I don't know whether, well, some of you will probably have heard of Raspberry Pi. Some of you might even own a Raspberry Pi. I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up if you bought one. Hey, there's a couple in the audience. Excellent. Thank you very much. But some of you may not have heard of Raspberry Pi at all. So what I wanted to do is start with show you a picture of Raspberry Pi and offer a brief description. So this is it. This is the Raspberry Pi. It's simple, yet elegant. And if I was to describe this in the most factual of terms, I would describe it as a small, credit card-sized Linux-based computer. It's based on a, well, that retails for about $25. It's based on an ARM processor inside a Broadcom SoC. And you'll see from the picture it has USB connectivity connected to a keyboard and mouse. Had an HDMI output for connecting to a display. We break out the GPIO pins to enable control, and the operating system, Linux-based, comes on an SD card. So quite a simple, elegant, Linux-based computer based on mobile phone technology. So nothing particularly inspiring at this point in time. But put this into the hands of the right people, support them in the right way, and you have the opportunity to inspire a generation and democratize technology. So to understand Raspberry Pi, you need to understand where it comes from, where it's its beginnings. And the beginnings of Raspberry Pi are very much based in the computer laboratory of Cambridge University, based in the UK. And the founders of Raspberry Pi, back in 2007, observed a problem. They were looking at how many graduates or people were applying to study computer science at university. And over the preceding decade, what they had noticed was that the number of people applying to study computer science had dropped from around 300 applications per place to 3. And at the same time, the knowledge of those students coming forward to study computer science, how much experience they had of computing, had significantly declined. So why was this? Why were there fewer students with less knowledge of computing coming forward in an area that is so clearly important for our own economy? Now, this is a complex problem, and there are many contributing factors. But it's not only a problem that's in the UK, it's also, you can observe similar trends in the US and Japan. So the founders of Raspberry Pi got together and they started thinking about this problem. And they're going, what is the problem? What can we do about this? So they looked into their own backgrounds, their own histories, looked at what inspired them to get into technology. And they came up with a hypothesis. And this hypothesis was that compared to the early 80s, there were simply less opportunities for kids and people to explore computing. Yes, there's more tablets around, there's more smartphones, there's more high-end game consoles, and these devices pervade our everyday lives. But actually the opportunity to explore computing, to experiment, to be creative, and understand how technology actually works had simply disappeared. In the march towards sleek, consumer-orientated devices, there was simply no opportunity to experiment anymore. If you look at the computing devices of the early 80s, they were quite basic machines. You would turn them on, and you'd boot up, and you'd get a simple blinking cursor at the bottom of the screen. It was an invitation to start to experiment. To get the computer to do anything, you had to invest time in terms of programming. But over the next decade, the PC won out. And the computing devices came from these, transformed from these very basic machines to something which became a productivity tool. You turned it on, you booted it, it became booted up into a desktop environment, and you ran Office applications. where's the opportunity to learn computing? Similarly, if you look at the gaming, that went under a similar transition. In the early 80s, you had the opportunity where you actually programmed, and you had to write your own games into computers. But over the next decade, the gaming market changed, and it became about high-end, high-definition 3D entertainment systems. And again, the opportunity to program was lost. So the founders looked at this and decided they wanted to do something about this, and they set out on a mission. And what they wanted to do was recreate the opportunity to enable people to explore computing, to understand how technology works, and try to inspire them through expressing creativity. And what they came up with was the Raspberry Pi. Now, were they successful in that endeavor? Well, the original goal of the founders of the Raspberry Pi was that they would sell around 10,000 units. And in the 18 months, or a little over 18 months, since the Raspberry Pi has launched, we've sold just over 2.5 million devices. So it's been far more successful beyond the wildest imagination of the original founders. So let's look at why the Raspberry Pi has been successful. So I think one of the big contributing factors to the success of Raspberry Pi is the creation of a sense of community around Raspberry Pi. And we spent a lot of time investing in our efforts to build that community, and I think that's reflected by, in some ways, by our following in social media. One of the startling sort of statistics about Raspberry Pi is that as followers on Twitter, we have 140,000 followers of Raspberry Pi on Twitter. Now, you may not know the statistics around, how big your own company's following is on Twitter. So I put this into context, okay? I noticed the MWC hashtag. So there's only about 30,000 people following MWC at Twitter. So there's around 5 times as many people following Raspberry Pi. Similarly, we have around 700,000 members of the Raspberry Pi Google Plus group. So we have this huge community of people who feel sort of engaged with Raspberry Pi. And this is a diverse community. It's made of many different people, and it ranges from people who are, young people who are just starting on their initial sort of journey into computing. It includes the hobbyists, the digital makers. It includes parents and professionals who in some ways are trying to recapture their passion for technology and have the opportunity to go off and do some hacking themselves. And the great thing about building that type of community is that if you empower them in the right way, they will engage with you and they will do things for you and invest their own time and effort. And that engagement might come in a variety of forms. It might be running a workshop on a Saturday morning, inviting kids to come along and experiment and have a computer club. It might be publishing a magazine, starting your own business about Raspberry Pi and showing the projects that can be done. Or it might simply be investing your own time and effort and creativity in creating an amazing project and then sharing that with the rest of the community. And over the last 18 months, we have seen some amazing projects which have utilized the Raspberry Pi come from that community. And I want to share some of those with you. I have a couple which are particular favorites of mine. The first is a drum machine. And this drum machine is made out of vegetables and capacitive touch. And so you as a user make different sounds and different noises from the drum machine by tapping the vegetables. A second great example is the work of Sam Aaron with a product that he created on Raspberry Pi called Sonic Pi. And this is where you create music by writing simple code. And you play that music back and it pushes that through a digital synthesizer, and you can create really, really complex music and compose music on the Raspberry Pi through coding. And these are great ways to engage communities, great ways to engage kids into technology and programming and letting them express their creativity. But probably one of the most inspiring projects that I've seen in the last 18 months is the work of Dave Ackerman. Now, some of you might remember last year that Red Bull did a very large sponsored project, and they persuaded Felix Baumgartner an Austrian, to jump in a spacesuit from space. So it was about 38 kilometers up into space. And he jumped and free fell and parachuted down to Earth in a spacesuit. Now, that's an amazing sort of, achievement, and, cost hundreds of millions of dollars to actually pull off. Now, Dave, a friend of ours, who's an amateur balloonist, was watching this and thought he could do one better. So he took our mascot, which is a little teddy bear called Babbage. What else would you call your mascot? And what he did, he strapped a Raspberry Pi to it, put a camera on it, put a GPS locator, and he attached him to a weather balloon. And he sent Babbage up into the atmosphere. He sent him to 39 kilometers, at which point Babbage was ejected from the balloon with a little parachute, and he parachuted down to Earth. Now, this is a great fun project, okay? But the real important part here, the serious part here, is this is an amazing project that is in the realms and budget of a school to do. Imagine your school sending a Raspberry Pi up into space with a camera and taking their own pictures of the Earth from near space orbit. How cool is that? So we have seen this fantastic, this creative, innovative community really contribute to the success of Raspberry Pi. But I think overall, if I was to try and capture, what are the real success factors that has made the Raspberry Pi the phenomenon it is today, I put it into sort of 6 areas. Firstly, serendipity. All businesses require a bit of luck. We had the right concept, the right product, at the right time. And we certainly tapped into a nostalgia and a resurgence and an interest of getting kids into technology, particularly in the UK. We also hit a certain price point. We knew this had to be, affordable by all, accessible by all. So we worked very hard in reducing that bill of materials to hit that $25 price point. And that was only possible because of the use of mobile technology. We're a small organization, so we had to adopt the right business strategy. And ours was one of partnership. We outsource our manufacturing, we outsource our distribution, logistics, supply chain, and we work closely with our partners and ask them, and help them to add value to the overall story. We don't try and do everything ourselves. I've talked a lot about community, but I think, and the contributions that makes. But you have to work on building a community. You have to invest social capital. You have to make it inclusive. You have to encourage people and celebrate their successes, celebrate their contribution, their inventiveness, and hold up examples of what they've done. You have to give people a sense of empowerment. So we are trying to, with the Raspberry Pi, empower people to get into technology, but we also want them to share. We want it to be an inclusive community, and we want them to feel that they're empowering other people as well. We also want people to build businesses around Raspberry Pi. We want people to create, new products, and for them to start their own entrepreneurial activities. And if you put all of this together, what you end up is an amazing sense of goodwill. You have a large community that feels part of the Raspberry Pi story. They are making a contribution. They are helping steering where Raspberry Pi technology gets used and where it goes from here. And in that way, not only do you create loyalty, do you create a network effect of people who are bound to the same mission, what you do is you enable them to feel part of the story, that they feel that they are in control. You have democratized technology. So that's a brief introduction to what Raspberry Pi is. I hope I've offered some stimulating thoughts, some insights into what has been, or what has made Raspberry Pi successful. And I would like to leave you with one thought. For those of you who didn't put your hand up and said you hadn't bought a Raspberry Pi, please go out and buy one, join the party, and have some fun. Thank you very much.